2 hours ago, the White House made the phone call that rewrites everything. After spending 14 months weaponizing tariffs against Canada, after threatening to make it the 51st state, after calling its prime minister, governor, the Trump administration placed a formal request. It asked Canada to join the Strait of Hormuz coalition. Washington needed ships. It needed political cover. It needed the one NATO ally it had spent over a year trying to destroy. And Mark Carney, sitting in Ottawa with every card in the deck, took his time before picking up the phone. Let us be precise about the situation Washington walked into. The Iran war entered its fourth week. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil and gas passes every day, has been brought to a near standstill. Brent crude hit $114 a barrel, up 55% from before the first American strikes. Goldman Sachs warned those prices could last through 2027. And Trump, who started this war without consulting a single NATO ally, was now going around the world asking those same allies to fix it for him. The response was swift. Germany said no, Italy said no, Japan said no, France deflected. The EU's foreign policy chief stated there was no appetite among the 27 member states to join. This is not Europe's war, Germany's defense minister said. The same week Trump called these nations cowards, he was quietly trying a different channel. He was calling Ottawa. And this time, the call went very differently than Washington had planned. Before we get into what Carney said, hit that subscribe button, because what happens in the next 72 hours will reshape both the trade war and the Hormuz crisis at the same time. Here is the strategic reality Washington failed to model when it started this trade war. Canada is not simply a trading partner. Canada controls Arctic airspace. Canada operates joint radar stations. Canada sits on top of the continent, and every American military route north runs through Canadian territory or Canadian cooperation. Canada has a navy with experience in exactly this kind of multilateral maritime mission. And critically, Canada had not yet said no. Ottawa signed the joint statement calling for freedom of navigation. Ottawa said it was examining the coalition question. That ambiguity, in the current climate, was worth more to Washington than any other diplomatic asset on the table. Carney understood that perfectly. He had been handed a moment that no amount of trade negotiation could manufacture. Carney appeared before cameras in Ottawa, composed and deliberate. He did not rush. He opened with a statement that traveled immediately across every diplomatic channel in Washington and Brussels. Canada believes in freedom of navigation. Canada is prepared to discuss how it can contribute to restoring safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And then he said the sentence that stopped the briefing room cold. But Canada will not be asked to pay twice for the same partnership. Then came the conditions. 4 of them, stated without theatrical flourish, each one more structurally damaging to the White House than the last. First, any Canadian participation would be contingent on the immediate suspension of all Section 232 tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and automobiles. Canada's defense industry runs on the same supply chains Trump's tariffs had been throttling for 14 months. Canada cannot contribute military assets to a coalition while its own defense manufacturing base is being deliberately undermined by the partner requesting that contribution. The Pentagon had no answer for it. Second, Canada required a formal commitment to enter USMCA review negotiations in good faith, without Section 301 investigations running as parallel pressure. You cannot ask a country to stand beside you militarily while simultaneously accusing that country of forced labor violations in the same legal category as authoritarian regimes. Partnership has a definition. Washington had been violating it for over a year. Third, and this is the move that made Washington go silent for nearly an hour, Canada offered an alternative to direct military participation. Canadian crude. Canada produces 3.8 million barrels of oil per day. With Hormuz effectively closed, the global economy is desperately searching for non-Gulf supply. Canada has it. Canada can move it. But the terms of that supply would be negotiated by Ottawa, not dictated by Washington. If the United States wanted Canadian energy to function as the strategic bridge through this crisis, it needed to stop treating Canadian energy policy as an extension of American foreign policy. Fourth, Canada formally proposed a bilateral framework for Arctic and continental security cooperation, entirely separate from the Hormuz question. The message was structural. Canada was not offering a trade. It was offering a reset. A defined partnership with mutual obligations and mutual respect. The kind of relationship that makes crises like this manageable because both countries trust each other before the crisis starts. But that framework required Washington to first acknowledge, formally, that the trade war had been conducted in bad faith against a sovereign ally. The market reaction arrived before Washington had even formulated a response. Canadian energy stocks surged. Crude futures for Canadian supply spiked as traders priced in Ottawa, becoming the world's emergency oil supplier. The Canadian dollar strengthened. American refinery stocks dropped on fears that Canadian crude terms were about to get significantly more expensive. Inside Washington, 3 separate administration sources described the reaction as controlled panic. The State Department had assumed Canada would eventually say yes because Canada always says yes. That assumption had collided with a Canada that had spent 14 months being told, explicitly, that the relationship no longer mattered to Washington. American business groups did not wait. The American Petroleum Institute warned that Hormuz disruption combined with deteriorating Canadian energy relations represented a simultaneous supply shock with no short-term resolution. The Chamber of Commerce issued a statement that read, in summary, as a direct accusation, the trade war had created the diplomatic isolation that made this coalition impossible to build in the first place. 2 hours ago, the White House thought it was making a routine request to a reliable ally. 2 hours later, it is staring at 4 conditions that require it to fundamentally reverse the trade war it started, in exchange for the coalition it cannot build without Canada. Trump wanted Canada dependent. He got Canada indispensable. Trump wanted leverage over Ottawa. Ottawa is now holding every card that matters. And Carney, the former central banker who understands the difference between price and value better than anyone in Washington, is in no hurry to discount either one. Smash that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because the next 48 hours will determine whether Washington finally learns the cost of the alliance it spent 14 months trying to break.